Hello, we are from Group 1 and today we will talk about the issue in localization. So, what is localization? Localization is when business adapt their system to the host country practice. The strategy usually used by big companies or companies that have a lot of funds for their business expansion. Regardless of which strategy that is used, of course, all of them have their own issue including localization. So, let's move on to the next part for the issues and I'll pass to AMIRA to continue for the next part.
The first localization issue that is highlighted is the sensitivity towards other cultures. Different countries, of course, have different cultures. Even within a country, there are different cultures in each region. In this part, I would like to talk about how cultural sensitivity becomes a problem in localization when MNCs are not sensitive enough towards different cultures. When MNCs do not pay attention to the local culture and the ways of life in host countries, it will not only hinder their business processes, but also create a bad image for the company. For instance, feedback communication varies among countries because of their culture. The difference in power distance and their human resource management processes are the reasons why it varies. For example, feedback communication in the US is different than in Asia as there are high level of individual freedom and lower power distance. If an Asian company would like to operate in the US with US employees, it is important that they adapt to the US culture and lower their levels of hierarchy to ensure that business processes becomes more efficient. It is also important to respect other religions when talking about cultures. If a Western MNC is to operate in Islamic countries, it is important for them to understand that every business process is carried out because of Allah. The same goes for their human resource management processes too. Although the process is similar, it is important that they take note of the importance of the religion in their day-to-day life, hence allowing them to avoid from making comments or actions that might offend the other party. That is all from me. I will now pass to NAURAH.
As beneficial as localization can be, there are also some risks and challenges that the HR management team must adapt. Localizing in developing countries, for example, may present some risks and challenges. Furthermore, several multinational companies are still attempting to narrow the gap between the advantages of local employees in national corporation and global corporation. However, the process still requires some works and local employees may encounter numerous discouragement in the subsidiary if localization is not carried out correctly. Culture is an evident component that may and does influence compensation and how compensation is perceived. For example, the Japanese culture is distinct in how it derives its HRM practices. The authors of a report on HRM practice in Japanese multinational companies highlight the uniqueness of Japanese style of HRM by implementing a seniority-based promotion and compensation element. When Japanese multinational companies implement localization, they must contend with the fact that not every country uses the same seniority-based reward system. Cultural differences have a significant impact on compensation policy due to variance in numerous cultural beliefs and customs, and the Japanese culture is not alone in this regard. Naturally, in order to manage cultural differences, one must first comprehend those cultures. People are educated to speak and act in a particular manner based on their origins. Germans, for example, they communicate more directly and like to be business-oriented in discussion, leaving jokes and humor aside. Italians, on the other hand, desire a deeper personal connections and are prone to blurring the lines between business and friendship. I'll pass the next part to ARISSA.
Assalamualaikum, my name is ARISSA KHAIRIN and I'll be discussing about tendency in localization between American and European MNCs. American MNCs are less likely than EU-owned subsidiaries to localize their HRM. Furthermore, European subsidiaries are more likely to follow their local practice than their American counterparts in the UK and Ireland, where foreign subsidiaries face fewer constraints to adapt to local HRM trends. Moreover, in France and Denmark, whose regulatory framework are more restrictive, European subsidiaries are nonetheless more likely than American subsidiaries to follow local practice, just with less uniformity. Besides that, American subsidiaries are more inclined than their European counterparts to follow local practice in Germany and Sweden, where regulatory regimes are even more restrictive. The patterns of localization are similar among HRM methods. There are some countries where American subsidiaries conform more closely to the domestic pattern than European subsidiaries for each of the 6 practices, which are training and development, systematic staffing, flexible work practices, performance appraisal and rewards, communication with employees, and labor relations. The most substantial differences between American MNCs, subsidiaries, and domestic operations are in the area of performance appraisal and rewards. However, no single HRM practice measure could adequately represent both patterns of localization. Instead, the most complete test was that American MNC subsidiaries differed from their European counterpart in the possibility of localizing HRM practices. Thank you. That's all from me. I will pass it to the next presenter, NUREEN, for the conclusion.
Overall, MNCs will face a lot of issues when conducting localization. Some issues include the sensitivity towards culture, the differences in system, and the tendency to localize. With this, we know that expanding business to other countries is not something easy to do and have a lot of things to be considered, although it can bring a great exposure and profit to the company. Thus, the firm must do a proper preparation before they decided to expand their business globally. That's all from me and our group. Thank you so much for listening. Do a proper.
As there are high level of individual
in Japanese multinational